Debbie Hersman, the former NTSB chairman, joins us now. And Debbie, I first want to talk to you about a term that's been going around right now, positive train control. What does that mean and how does it factor in? Was it even in use in this situation?
Yeah, so they have said now at Amtrak that positive train control was not active, was not on this train at the time of derailment. Positive train control is something that's been around for decades. The NTSB has recommended that all passenger lines have positive train control. This is technology that's really redundant. It backs up the engineer if they're fatigued, if they're distracted, if they end up becoming capacitated. It will help them prevent a collision with another train, and if they're going too fast for conditions or exceeding the speed limit, it will slow the train down and stop it.
So they're early in this investigation, so we don't know the exact speed and a lot of the other factors, but at this stage, for them not to be using that sort of technology, in your expert opinion, do you think that's something that needs to be done, even with the high costs associated with it?
Absolutely. When I was at the NTSB for over 10 years, we recommended this technology because we know that human beings make mistakes, and we want to protect against those. This technology is that backup to human failure. So we've recommended at the NTSB this technology since the 1970s. It has been implemented in many countries around the world and on some tracks in the United States. It was actually required in 2008 after 25 people were killed in California by 2015 on all passenger routes, but Congress extended that deadline. And so all passenger routes have more time to put it on. But as you can see from this crash, every time we don't have positive train control, it renews the calls for this technology.
Okay, so Debbie, I want to take you through some video. This first shot is going to be an aerial look at the scene of the crash. Now, we do see the train. It was right at a curve. Looking at this video, what does that tell you about the crash and what might have happened? Do you think the curve was a factor in this?
So always when you look at the infrastructure of the tracks, you're going to see this was what they call high-speed passenger route. It could go up to 79 miles per hour, but you have limiting factors, just like you do when you exit an interstate and you come off that ramp. You're going to have a lower posted speed limit. They're going to have a lower posted speed limit at that curve probably, so that train can negotiate that curve without derailing. At this point, we don't know whether it was caused by an overspeed at that curve. That's one of the possibilities, but it could be any one of a number of things. They'll be looking at the track conditions to make sure there wasn't a track failure, and at the equipment to make sure that everything was working as designed.
Okay, now in this next piece of video, you can see that only a handful of the train cars remained on the tracks, and one of them appears to be, would you say, is that a locomotive? And how does the locomotive factor into the direction and the speed and the guidance of this train and for it to still be on the tracks? What does that say?
So in this case, these Talgo train sets that they use in Oregon and Washington for these routes, they actually, like some of the trains here, they have a push-pull operation. So you might have a locomotive at one end, and then you have a locomotive at another end. And so sometimes they're pulling the trains, and then they have a locomotive at the end. And so in this situation, really looking at the orientation of that train and understanding what happened, we do know that there were locomotives that did derail in this event.
Okay. Now, in this next picture, it's pretty horrifying to see, but it's the actual train, one of the cars upside down. Now, we have been told that seatbelts, they're not really required at this point, but when you see something like that, and given the impact, do you believe that after this crash, that should change?
So passenger train cars have not typically had seatbelts on them, just like in our transit operations. Again, those cars don't have seatbelts on them. You have a lot of passengers getting on and getting off, and as far as use of those belts, the desire is really to keep the event from occurring in the first place, make sure that they don't derail, that they don't have a collision, and then protect that survivable space that's inside those cars to make sure that it doesn't get crushed and that people can survive. Now, clearly falling off an overpass, this is one of the worst case scenarios. You know, we don't want to see vehicles upside down, regardless of whether you have belts. But in this case, really a challenge for the survival mechanics. The NTSB will look at that, and they have made recommendations in the past about more survivable materials inside, so softer materials. So again, if you get thrown around inside of a train car, you don't want to hit hard surfaces, tables and things that protrude. So that has been an issue in investigations in the past.
Okay, so Debbie, this next photo, it looks like it's wheels, a close-up look of the wheels of the train on the highway below. The fact that at this point they are completely detached from any of the cars, what does that tell you?
Yeah, so this is really an issue of gravity, because what's happened is the train sets have come off the tracks, and once those wheels, they're very heavy, once they were on that overpass and fell to the ground below, really the train cars are resting for the most part on top of those wheels. And so this, is clearly a concern, because everyone who was involved in this event was clearly being thrown around. The mechanics of this crash, can be very severe, and we're seeing fatalities here in this event. So our hearts certainly go out to those families. It's close to the holidays. It's just heartbreaking. It
certainly is. Now, this last photo, Debbie, we were noticing that there were markings. We saw numbers at some point, but in this bright orange neon, different markings on the train. What does that signify?
So these could be emergency responders who've gone in, taken a look. They cleared a train. Maybe they're letting folks know that they've already been inside and that they've cleared people out. It could be another marker if there are any safety issues, like they don't want people to go in there because they're worried that they may not be stable. So you'd certainly want to make sure that if you're on site, that you know what you're doing and you have coordination with the lead responders on site to understand what that means.